Welcome to the Morning Walk with Murty Digital Stroll.
Glad to be here.
So, what if I told you that trying to be the next Bill Gates is actually the fastest way to guarantee you will never build a billion-dollar company?
I mean, it sounds completely backward.
Right. Because we are just hardwired to study successful people. We map out their exact blueprints and, try to replicate their steps perfectly.
We constantly crave that predictability. When you're staring at a blank canvas, the easiest psychological safety net is to just look at the giants who already conquered the landscape.
Yeah, you assume their path is the only safe way forward. But in the digital age, that instinct to copy success isn't just misguided. It is honestly a fatal trap.
It really is. And, as the mentor of the Antarami VA Academy, my goal today is to strip away all those surface-level tech buzzwords and the comfort of the crowd. We need to find that Gurukul 2.0 wisdom.
Right.
Those timeless foundational truths that dictate what actually works beneath all the hype.
Absolutely. And as the architect of Antarami, my focus is on how behavior and systems fundamentally migrate from old paradigms to new ones.
Which is so crucial right now.
It is. And that requires looking through the digital prism. We aren't here to just, summarize an article or give you a table of contents today. We are here to extract the legacy code for Project Antarami.
The underlying logic.
Exactly. The logic that you can use to completely reprogram how you view innovation. Oh, and before we extract today's code, a quiet thank you to the TOI World Desk over on timesofindia.com.
Oh, definitely.
Their article set this whole stroll in motion and provided the spark for the framework we're about to dismantle.
A wonderful spark indeed. To you, the listener, whether you're navigating a career transition, maybe evaluating a startup, or just trying to make sense of the technology landscape in 2026, this Gurukul session is going to fundamentally challenge your definition of what a winning strategy even looks like.
Yeah, it really will.
So to start, we have to isolate a piece of outdated malware operating in almost every corporate strategy room right now. And that is the blind worship of best practices.
Right, because following best practices assumes the world is static. Which, it obviously isn't. The source text brings up a really foundational philosophy from Peter Thiel, specifically from his 2014 book, 0 to 1.
Right.
He anchors his entire worldview on one profound observation, which is every moment in business happens only once.
Think about the gravity of that statement for a second. The next Bill Gates is not going to build an operating system.
No.
The next Larry Page or Sergey Brin won't make a search engine. And the next Mark Zuckerberg is definitely not going to create a social network.
Right, because doing something we already know how to do takes the world from 1 to N.
Exactly. You're just adding more of something familiar to a crowded market.
Imitation is a 1 to N strategy.
It is. But when you do something entirely new, you go from 0 to 1. Having a unique selling proposition it's non-negotiable.
Because the paradox of innovation is that the most successful companies don't actually compete in existing markets. They avoid competition entirely by creating a category of one.
Exactly. And when we study these business case studies, we often make the huge mistake of studying the product instead of the mindset.
Right. We look at the specific lines of code or, the user interface, rather than looking at how they identified an unmastered problem.
And that distinction separates a visionary from a technician. A technician looks at Google and says, I need to build a better algorithm to index the internet.
Right.
But a visionary looks at Google and says, wow, they found a massive point of friction in the world that no one else was addressing. What is the equivalent point of friction in my industry today?
Yeah, transformative businesses solve unmastered problems. They don't just copy yesterday's breakthroughs. It's kind of like trying to win a marathon by stepping exactly in the footprints of the person who won yesterday.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. You're so focused on the past, you don't even see the track ahead. But wait, I want to push back on this slightly. From a strategic standpoint, isn't studying success how we learn? Isn't that why we look at these giants?
Well, but you have to clarify the difference between adopting a successful mindset versus imitating a successful product. If you're copying the tech giants' products, you aren't actually learning from them.
Ah, I see. Because the terrain physically changes after the winner crosses the finish line.
Precisely. Which brings us to the hidden variable that explains why that track vanished in the first place.
Time.
Yeah. When we discuss why a specific product achieved massive scale, we tend to over-index on the brilliance of the engineering And we completely ignore the calendar.
Right. Time is the ultimate irreplicable resource in any business strategy. I mean, you can always secure another round of funding, you can always hire a more experienced executive team, but you cannot rewind the market conditions to a previous decade.
You really can't. Let's apply that to the historical examples from our source material. Take Bill Gates and Microsoft in the 1970s and 80s.
Okay.
Microsoft didn't invent the personal computer,
No, they didn't.
but they recognized a unique, fleeting moment in time. Hardware was suddenly becoming accessible to the masses, but the user experience was incredibly fragmented. Every machine basically spoke a different language.
So they provided the unifying foundation, Microsoft Windows.
Exactly. And once they provided that foundation, they triggered a mechanism known as network effects. It wasn't just that Windows was a good product, it became exponentially more valuable with every single person who used it.
Right, because developers realized they only needed to write their software once for Windows to reach millions of customers. So they just stopped writing software for competing operating systems.
And then consumers bought Windows computers because that was where all the software was.
Well,
it created this self-reinforcing loop that essentially locked the market in place.
so trying to build a desktop operating system today is a guaranteed losing strategy. It doesn't matter how elegant your code is.
Not at all. The window of opportunity to be the unifying standard for that specific technological era has totally slammed shut. The market matured.
Right, the switching costs for a consumer or a developer to abandon that ecosystem and rebuild everything from scratch are just insurmountable today.
And the same temporal logic applies to Google in the late 1990s. The World Wide Web was expanding at this terrifying exponential rate. The sheer volume of information was threatening to make the internet completely unusable.
Yeah, and Google succeeded because they solved the specific problem of organizing that chaos at the exact moment the chaos reached a tipping point.
Exactly. Today, launching a general-purpose search engine fails. The market is already consolidated around an established leader.
It fails because every time a user has clicked a link over the last 25 years, they have literally trained Google's algorithm.
Yep.
A new competitor doesn't just need a better mathematical formula. They need 2 decades of human behavioral data to match the relevance. That creates a data moat that is practically impossible to cross.
The problem of finding a website has been definitively solved for the average user. Their habits are formed.
And this concept right here is the beating heart of what we call digital migration. Structural migrations only happen once.
Right.
When a population moves from the analog world to a digital solution in a specific sector, they unpack their bags, they build their houses, and they settle down.
They do.
They don't migrate sideways to a slightly different version of the same digital solution unless there's a catastrophic failure of the existing system. So, for you listening, the question you have to ask yourself is this. Are you pouring your energy and capital into building a beautiful, structurally sound bridge over a river that the market has already crossed?
Oof. The realization that you're building a bridge to nowhere is a painful moment for any founder. And it happens constantly. Founders convince themselves they can win by simply being 10% better than the incumbent.
Right. They think a slightly cleaner user interface or, a marginally faster loading speed will trigger a mass migration.
But it won't. If you miss that initial window of unmastered territory, you don't just fail. You get relegated to a state of endless, brutal competition.
Which is where we have to extract one of the most provocative pieces of the legacy code from this source. Peter Thiel completely rejects the traditional playbook that says competition is the ultimate validator of a good idea.
He really does.
He asserts that competition is actually a massive warning sign. He famously says, competition is for losers.
It's a statement that makes traditional economists just flinch. But we have to look at the underlying mechanism of what happens when a market becomes crowded.
Okay.
When you're in a highly competitive space, you are signaling that your product has become a commodity. If you and a dozen other companies are selling essentially the same software, the only way to win a customer's attention is to spend massively on marketing.
And the only way to close the deal is to lower your price.
Exactly.
But wait, I have to push back on this just to clarify the corporate perspective. I mean, we are practically brainwashed from day one of business school to believe that competition is the engine of capitalism.
Oh, absolutely.
It forces you to innovate. It lowers prices for the consumer. It weeds out the weak. So telling a founder that competition is for losers feels incredibly counterintuitive, maybe even a little arrogant.
Well, through the Gurukul 2.0 lens, it only feels arrogant if you assume the goal of business is to win a fight. True wisdom isn't shouting louder than everyone else in a crowded room. It's finding the quiet space where your unique value is undisputed. When you're trapped in that cycle of lowering prices and raising marketing budgets, your profit margins shrink to zero.
Right.
You're fighting tooth and nail for a tiny sliver of a pie. What Thiel is arguing is that true innovation happens when you step out of that crowded arena entirely and bake a new pie.
Let's break down the math of that scenario. Say there are 50 restaurants on a single street fighting over the dinner crowd. A generic burger might cost $5. If they have to spend $2 on local marketing just to steal a customer from a rival, their margin is razor thin. They're all engaged in a race to the bottom. True innovation isn't figuring out how to make a slightly cheaper burger than the guy next door.
No, true innovation is looking at that street and realizing no one is serving the night shift hospital workers at 3 in the morning.
Yes, and when you serve those night shift workers, you don't need to optimize the existing competitive menu. You solve the problem of access for a completely ignored demographic.
Exactly. You are the only option at 3:00 a.m.
So you can charge $8 for that meal, spend absolutely nothing on marketing because word of mouth in the break room is instantaneous and your profit margin is massive.
That is a perfect illustration of finding a category of one. This gives you a monopoly, and not in the illegal, predatory sense of cornering an existing market by force, but in the sense that you are the only entity capable of solving that specific problem.
Right.
Because you aren't forced to slash your prices to beat a rival, you maintain healthy profit margins.
Which means you can take those margins and reinvest them heavily into research and development, making your product so exponentially better that even if a competitor eventually notices your success, they are years behind.
Exactly. The lack of competition actually fuels a deeper, more sustained kind of innovation.
So let's take this entire framework, the irreplicable nature of timing, the trap of imitation, the destructive mechanics of competition. Let's test it against the massive technological shift of our current era. Let's decode the artificial intelligence mirage.
Yes, this is where the legacy code becomes incredibly urgent for our listeners in 2026. If you look at the landscape today, it is flooded with companies aggressively pitching themselves as the next OpenAI.
Or trying to design generalized AI chips to be the next NVIDIA.
Right. And based on Thiel's philosophy, this is the entirely wrong ambition. They're trying to build the foundational infrastructure of artificial intelligence.
So if building the foundation models is the equivalent of building the operating system, then the real gold rush isn't in building the AI itself.
No, it's not.
Trying to build a new, generalized, large language model in 2026 is exactly like trying to build a desktop operating system in 1995.
The window has already closed. History dictates that the companies defining the next decade will likely not be building another chatbot or another AI chip.
So where will they emerge?
Instead, they're going to emerge by using AI to transform non-obvious fields. Legacy industries like healthcare, manufacturing, education, and scientific research.
Right, the unmastered domains.
Yes. Finding the massive points of friction that have been ignored. Consider the global shipping industry. For decades, cold chain logistics, like transporting temperature-sensitive pharmaceuticals across oceans, has relied on static route planning.
Which leads to billions of dollars in spoiled medicine every year. But no one in Silicon Valley was rushing to solve the refrigeration schedules of cargo ships because it isn't a glossy consumer app.
Exactly. But imagine a company in 2026 that doesn't try to build a better chatbot, but instead trains a predictive AI model, specifically on meteorological data and port congestion analytics, to dynamically reroute those shipments in real time.
Wow.
The AI predicts the ambient temperature of the cargo hold based on deep ocean currents.
Right, because OpenAI doesn't know the nuances of maritime law. NVIDIA doesn't understand the thermodynamic thresholds of liquid vaccines.
But if you have spent 10 years working in global logistics, you do. That is your unique advantage.
You are combining this powerful new computational tool with an old, stubborn, highly specific problem. So if you're trying to build the next OpenAI, you're essentially trying to build a 1980s operating system today.
Exactly. By solving that unmastered problem in a legacy industry, you aren't competing for a fractional percentage of market share against 100 other software startups. You become the indispensable infrastructure for that specific domain.
So my advice to you listening is to stop looking at the generic, glossy tech everyone is fighting over. Look at the unmastered, unrecognized problems in your own specific industry.
Yes, it requires deleting the malware that tells you to seek validation in crowded markets. The presence of intense competition doesn't mean you are in the right place. it means you are too late.
Well said. Let's synthesize the legacy code we've extracted on this digital stroll. First, timing is an unrepeatable resource. You cannot manufacture a cultural or technological window of opportunity once the market has settled.
And second, imitation is a strategic dead end, because it focuses on the artifact of success rather than the unmastered problem that necessitated it.
Right. Third, competition is a symptom of commoditization. True innovation seeks monopolies of unique value, where you are the only one capable of solving a specific problem.
And finally, applying this to 2026, the future belongs to those who apply new tools to unmastered legacy domains, rather than fighting over the crowded center of the tech world.
These Gurukul sessions are designed to pull you out of the frantic noise of the market. Project Antaryami is about reprogramming how we navigate the digital era, moving from a mindset of anxious imitation to a state of deliberate, wise creation.
It is recognizing that your unique perspective on a specific friction point in the real world is far more valuable than your ability to copy a competitor's feature set.
Absolutely. You have to migrate your mindset before you can successfully migrate your business. As we wrap up this extraction, I want to leave you with a final, lingering question to ponder on your own.
I love these.
If the next Bill Gates won't build an operating system and the next tech giant won't build a foundational chatbot, what is the massive, messy, unrecognized problem sitting right in front of you that everyone else is simply too busy competing over yesterday's news to see? Keep walking, keep seeking, and we'll see you on the next digital stroll.